So many of the stories in the Old Testament work exactly that way, where you have two different stories happening at the same time. You have a Sunday school story, like, Noah and the ark, or the conquest of Canaan, and you can read that. You can read that on a surface level, and kind of that's what the story's like. So imagine if you're watching the Seinfeld video and you didn't know anything about American history. That story would just be the story about three friends arguing about something that happened. But once you realize that there's something else going on, you start looking at the details, and it's the details that point you to the second story, the ultimate story. Now, if you didn't know anything about the Kennedy assassination, is there anything in the Seinfeld clip that would begin to point you to look at some kind of alternate explanation?
Video.
And what would those things be?
I mean, there's the old-timey kind of like 50s video.
Right. Why is there a 50s video? Why is it mimicking that film? Why is the umbrella guy there? Why, the whole back and to the left, back and to the... There's just something about the story that doesn't make sense until you start looking for the second story. And the same with the Bob video. When we watched it, you could tell, okay, this person can sing and these words are something, but there was something about it that was off enough that you thought, okay, there's obviously something I'm not getting here. Then when you saw the video and you realize these are all palindromes, and if we watch the whole thing, I mean, it's like 28 palindromes that he has, and some of them are very clever. I mean, you get these palindromes, that are, many, many words long, and you realize, wow, somebody's gone to a lot of work to make this song funny. And when you watch the Weird Al video, there's some questions that you have. Why is this in black and white? Who is that rabbi-looking guy? Why are they standing over there? And when you start looking, and when we went to the Bob Dylan video, you realize, okay, this is interesting, and it turns out it's the first music video. You think of all the videos that have followed, that's like the very first one, and it's interesting for that reason. And then the whole, why are these words just coming at us? Jump down a manhole, find yourself a sandal, try to avoid scandal. You start wondering, well, do those words mean anything? And you start looking at the Jack Kerouac novel and you realize they all mean something. And so you have a series of kind of strange things that the more you know about the background, the more full of meaning they are. I would contend that the Bible works exactly that way. It works exactly that way in Isaiah 8. In fact, all of Isaiah, the book of Revelation works that way. You come and you look at things that seem kind of strange and meaningless, but then you start digging, you start pulling the thread, and you realize every single word of this is crafted and it's meaningful and it means something. So I would contend that that's how Isaiah 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, in fact, all of Isaiah works. And we want to look at some of that today. So I'm going to read a little bit in 8 and some in 9, and we're just going to look at kind of these two stories going on at the same time. Then the Lord said to me, take a large tablet, write on it in common letters belonging to Maher Sha'al Hashbaz. And that name means speedy is the booty, swift is the prey, or something like that. And I will get a reliable witness, and I wonder if that's reliable, quote unquote, because the priest here is the one who introduced the false worship from Damascus. I'll get reliable witnesses, Yerechiah the priest and Zechariah son of Yebechariah, to attest for me. I went to the prophetess. She conceived and bore a son. And the Lord said to me, call his name Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz. For before the boy knows to cry, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. The Lord spoke to me again, because this people has refused the waters of Shiloah. Okay, so what's true of every, and what do we need to ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. It means the sent one. And we run into this pool when Jesus spits on the ground and rubs mud on the guy's eyes and tells him to go wash in the one having been sent. He washes in the one having been sent, and he can see. This people has refused the waters of Shiloah that flow gently and rejoice over Rezin, the son of Remaliah. Therefore, behold, the Lord is bringing against them the waters of the river, mighty and many, the king of Assyria, and all his glory, and it will rise over its channels and go over its banks, and it will sweep into Judah, and it will overflow and pass on, reaching even to the neck, and its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. And what's true of every word, every name in Hebrew? So what does Emmanuel mean? God is with us. And so who's Isaiah talking to at that point? Be broken, you peoples, be shattered, give ear, all you far countries, strap on your armor, be shattered. Strap on your armor and be shattered. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand. Why? Emmanuel. That's what it says in Hebrew. But is it why God is with us, or is it the name? And we don't know. The Lord spoke thus to me with his strong hand upon me and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. For the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy, him you are to fear. Let him be your dread, and he will become a sanctuary. Now, who is the he there? The Lord. He will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense and a rock of stumbling to both houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many will stumble on it. And like there's issues in the Hebrew. If it were on it, there would be a different ending right here. It says they will stumble. And this is the word many, but this should say on them. But it can't mean on them because it's talking about a he. You could read it, and many among them will stumble. I would have expected that word here, but there's something weird going on there. The ESV and many translations amends the text and say many will stumble on it. And if it's the it, is it the rock that has become the cornerstone of the temple? They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared, taken. Bind up the testimony, seal up the teaching among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob. I will hope in him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me. Quoted in the New Testament as being said by Jesus, not being said by Isaiah. And you read the New Testament and you say, why in the world are you saying that's Jesus? Until you realize it's like that Seinfeld quote where things are doing double duty at the same time. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs. In other words, Isaiah is saying, my kids are signs that point on themselves to greater spiritual truth. Portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells in Mount Zion. When they say to you, inquire mediums and necromancers and who chirp and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Should they inquire of the dead in behalf of the living? To the teaching, to the testimony. If they will not speak according to this word, it's because they have no dawn. They will pass through the land greatly distressed and hungry, and when they are hungry, they will be enraged and will speak contemptuously against their king and their God, and turn their faces upward. They will look to the earth, but behold distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In former times he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. You multiplied the nations, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. Every boot of trampling in warrior in battle tumult, every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. Now, this could be looking forward to the Assyrian army being wiped out, the 185,000 that God kills and they go to spoil the camp. Or it could be pointing beyond that to something else. It looks like it's something else to me in verse 5 and 6. Well, 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulder, and he will be called a miracle. He will be called Counseling One. He will be called El Gibor. Okay, so somebody have a printed Bible. I want you to look at Isaiah 20:21. This is the only other place I could find where we have El Gibor. Who will read that for us? Isaiah 10:21. Who will read that?
Our remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God.
To the mighty God. And you can see this is our phrase, El Gibor. And when you look it up, how many times does El Gibor appear in the Hebrew Bible? Twice. And the first one refers to whom? Jesus. And the second one, which is one chapter away, refers to whom? God. So, do you have a question?
Are they translated?
Why are they translated different? Are they translated differently in English?
No, it is mighty God. Why are they referring to two different?
Two different people. And what do you think, Jack?
Well, if we're looking at the Trinity, they are the same person. And back in Deuteronomy, it says, "My lords, my gods, my lords."
Lord is one. That's right. And that tension between the singular and the plural in God is on every single page of the Hebrew Bible. It spans from Genesis 1:1 all the way to the chronological end of the Bible, which is Malachi, last verse in Malachi.
Does that cause like problems for like people who read the Bible in Hebrew?
It absolutely causes problems because there was a recognition that there's so much of that going on that in about 400 AD, the rabbis put a stop to it. They had a entity they called the Little Yahweh, and even had a name for the Little Yahweh, Metatron. Well, you can imagine what Christians would do with that argument. If you believe that God can go out of himself, and be immanent in the world, if I'm a Christian, I'm going to take that argument and say, well, that's who we're saying Jesus is. And Justin Martyr, in his dialogue with Trypho, the Jew, he points out all those texts. He says, your texts have a plurality within a more basic unity, and what do you do with it? And even some people like Philo, Philo says, well, you've got God and these two cherubs, and Philo says that's not a problem. One is, the creative power of God. One is the governing. One is called God. One is called Lord. And so, it's okay that you've got three figures there. It's just God and his powers. Well, if you're a Christian, what are you going to do with that argument? A Jewish person has just admitted that, there's this plurality within the more basic unity. And Philo was enough of a Jew where his brother was one of the 5 Jews who represented Judaism to the Roman government. So he's like from a completely Jewish family. And you have Targums will say, well, God as wisdom created the heavens and the earth. Well, you've got God working out of his, wisdom. Well, you can imagine what Christians would do with that. And that's exactly what they did until about 400. And the rabbi said, look, we're getting creamed with this argument. Anybody mentions the word Metatron or Little Yahweh, you're out. And so that stopped being an explanation. But you have, in the Babylonian Talmud, where the word Elohim is used of human judges, you have in the Babylonian Talmud, they say, well, Elohim is not a dual Elohim, it's a Elohim, a true plural, and the Babylonian Talmud says it has to be, you have to have at least 3 judges to call them Elohim, because it's not Elohim, two judges. So here you've got Jewish people just making the point that would just fall into the hands of a Christian, and it seems to me that's a great case. In fact, when the rabbinic Bible in Venice, Italy, was printed, I can't remember the man's name, but they got the best Hebrew reader they could find to be the editor of it, and so he starts putting the Bible together, and he was used to reading things in the Talmud, and he started reading the Bible, and he read the Bible and said, if this is what the Hebrew Bible said, then Christianity is true, and he converted. The second editor they got converted to Christianity. They went through 3 editors before they got a guy who would just print the thing out without converting to Christianity. That's how powerful these arguments are, in my opinion. Of course, my Jewish brothers would qualify all that, but for me, as a Christian, spent 30 years in the Jewish text, it still just shocks me in awe to read the things that are in terms of pointing forward to Christ, and this is one of them right here. El Gibor called the child, El Gibor called God Almighty, within a couple of chapters of each other. So, other comments? Did I see David?
I think it's kind of interesting because that's almost a little confusing even for a Christian, because the Trinity is usually seen as distinct parts, and to call a different person of God by the same name as the other one, that's really confusing to just the whole mix of things.